It will not work very well if someone doesn't ask questions. So we encourage even silly questions, nonsensical questions, even idiotic questions are welcome at this time. Simple questions, complicated questions.
Oh no. Let me think. Um, what? What? The what are the 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 outward impacts of having a community of people aware of Krishna consciousness? What are um, the ramifications of that on others who aren't aware, and how does that impact? How should that impact the behavior of the movement?
That was a really good question. Can you remind me of your name, please? Miro. Miro with an L? Miro. Miro. I want to make sure that I understand your question correctly. So, what is the impact of a community of Bhakti Yogis on the broader society?
Yeah, well, I mean more of a focus on how does that impact change the approach
H-
that they do?
How,
Should it?
how should the impact of a community of Bhakti Yogis
Yeah.
affect the individual practitioner?
How should the response of others who aren't affect the approach, or should it not?
I'm sorry, I just can't hear, so I'm going to have to give you the microphone back.
How should the effect of bhakti yogis on those who aren't? How should it come into consideration in the practice of whatever aspect of a community or an individual in it? Yeah, that's basically what I mean. Or should it have no impact?
I'm still not sure if I got it right. So, in other words, the how should the behavior of a community of Bhakti Yogis be affected by other people
Who aren't?
who aren't?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, aside from the preaching, I mean the almost like the almost like a utilitarian kind of the the positive impacts of
The
Krishna consciousness on others who aren't.
Okay, good. That's what I thought originally.
Yeah,
Yeah. So, if there's a community of Bhakti Yogis, how are they affecting the rest of people that aren't necessarily practicing Bhakti
yeah, yeah. And what does that mean
for the future?
yeah, sure.
Okay. Well, you see, Bhakti Yoga. I could answer that in a conventional way, or I could answer it in a more esoteric way. So let's start with the conventional way. And and that means because bhakti includes Vedanta, all of Vedanta, all the knowledge of Vedanta is included within bhakti. And Vedanta begins with understanding that one, we're not our bodies, and two, we're not our minds. Now that fundamental piece of knowledge, that we're not our bodies and we're not our minds, has incredible potential, both for the individual to become free of false designations, free of fear and anxiety, and free of so much pain when you can process the difficulties that we go through life through that knowledge. it's one thing to feel depressed, and it's another thing to be able to say, my mind is going through some depression, but I'm fine. And so for the individual, that kind of knowledge has tremendous potential to give relief. But it also has potential to give relief on a societal basis. And this relates, I believe, more to your question. Here's an example that relates to this. Are you ready, Miro? Imagine a world wherein your entire status in life, all the privileges that you receive in life, how you're seen by other people, the opportunities that you have in life are all dependent solely on one thing, and that is the car that you drive. Those that have luxury cars, Mercedes-Benz and Lexus, etc., they're given respect. People look up to them. They're considered the beautiful people. Doors are open for them. Opportunities in life are there for them. They tend to live materially a higher level of life. And anybody with like an economy car is seen as second, third class citizens. They don't get all those opportunities. People look down on them. When they walk down the street or drive in their car, people look at them as if they are lesser than themselves. Okay? You can imagine such a place? You could imagine there might be a lot of tension in that society, a lot of resentment in that society, a lot of social tension, but like a lot of pain in that world, and a lot of division in that world, a lot of alienation in that world. But imagine if a law were put to place into that community, and what that law was is that every day everyone must switch their car. So the person that's driving the luxury car today, tomorrow they will likely be driving an economy car. And the people driving the economy car today will likely be driving the luxury car the next day. Okay? So imagine what that one change would do to that world. No longer, if I'm driving a luxury car, can I feel better than the other person, because I know I'm only in this car for one day and tomorrow I'm going to be in another car. And no longer when I'm in the economy car am I angry or resentful at other people, because I know they're there now, but I was there yesterday. I had the luxury car yesterday, and tomorrow I may have one again. And so it's only for a day that I'm driving this car. It's not me. It's just a car. You understand? Can you imagine what that would do to the society, that there would no longer be first-class citizens and second-class citizens, because we're all going around and round and trading cars all the time. So it kind of equalizes everything. It makes sense? Yes? So that is what knowledge of the self, Atmagyana, can do for a society. Right? We live in a society that's divided. There's so much tension. Tension on the basis of gender, tension on the basis of race, tension on the basis of age, tension on the basis of species. In so many different ways we're divided, by nation, by family. So many divisions are there. And those divisions are there based on ignorance, based on a lack of understanding of the self, of who I am, that I'm not this body. The body is something that I'm just temporarily passing through for a moment. And even the mindset and the conditioning within the mind that I have or that others have are also temporary circumstances that come and go and do not identify the actual self within that body, behind that particular mind. So if that's the case, it's just like switching cars. I'm in this body, I'm in a male body, right? It's an American body, right? Right now. But I wasn't not so long ago, and in the future I won't be again. So this isn't really who I am. And I might be in a female body in my next life, and I might be from India. I don't know what it'll be. But if we all know this, then we can begin to relate to each other on the true level of equality, which is the level of the self, of the Atma, right? So this can eliminate so much of the tensions that exist in society. We might dedicate ourselves to solving one of these kind of social issues in the world. And even if we dedicate ourselves fully to it, we see that they tend to remain. They tend to last. They tend to be very difficult to break down. And even if we were entirely successful, which we never see happens, there would still be so many other problems. So many. If we were able to solve racism, we might not. Would still there would be sexism. If we're able to solve sexism, still there'd be nationalism. You know, and the tensions still remain. But this knowledge of the self, it addresses them all in one shot. Have you ever heard the phrase that there's a rising tide raises all boats? Right? It doesn't matter how many different boats. What the rising tide lifts them all up. And in the same way, knowledge of the self has the potential. Knowledge of the Atma, Atma Jnana, has the potential to solve all the social problems just by understanding who we actually are. So in that sense, a community of yogis, a community of Vedantins, a community of Bhakti Yogis, it does have the potential, if we can really embody it, if we can really imbibe it, if we can really understand it and live it, we have the potential to show a society that actually functions well. A society where actually love becomes the center of it. And which brings me to the more esoteric answer, which is what effect can a bhakti community have on a larger community? Vedanta is included within bhakti, so all that I've said is already included. But there's something deeper, that even if we were able to understand that we're all eternal, that we're not these bodies, we're not these minds, we're made of the same spiritual energy, even if we're able to understand that and achieve a level of peace, there's still something much deeper to achieve in life. And the Bhakti Yogis would say that state of peace is not the goal. It's just normal, neutral, civilized life that serves as an excellent platform to go much deeper into understanding our eternal connection with the root of all existence, which exists in a personal form of the Bhagavan, of the Supreme in the personal form, and that each of us, there's not one person that doesn't share that a connection, a unique and beautiful and completely fulfilling connection with that root of all existence. So bhakti can identify that Bhagavan, can expound upon that Bhagavan, can help us understand the beauty of Bhagavan, the depth of Bhagavan, the mercy of Bhagavan. And that mercy is capable of touching every life in a way that one can find a kind of ecstasy, a kind of bliss, a kind of ananda that nothing in this world can come even close to competing with. So a community of Bhakti Yogis also has the potential to communicate that, to practice that, to imbibe that, to share that with anyone that has the openness to receive it. Did that get to your question? Would you like to add to it, or?
So the social responsibility is sort of centers around this the spreading almost, or the sharing of the outward, the external aspect of it, aside from the internal understanding and connection, is a sharing. But there's, at this moment in time, the social responsibility lies, like, there's no other moral um, expectations that come with that higher state of mind that would guide someone in all the other aspects of their life at this moment in time. There's no other moral requirements that should be implicated into the society, because is the social duty just this bringing of supreme awareness, because that ultimately will be the greatest solution? Is there no other relief or moral attributes that we should all have? You know what I mean? That's the other part of my question.
Thank you, and let me just make sure that I understand it correctly. So you're setting aside what I just said, which was that the sharing of Atmagyana or the sharing of bhakti has benefits others. So, yeah, the highest benefit. Does that mean that other types of outreach, other types of um, philanthropy, or other types of justice, fighting for justice, that these are not important?
I just mean, is there not a certain ethical, I don't know how to describe it, a certain eth- ethical, obligation that should be shared by all, and sort of an immoral obligation that is shared by all, who are aware, that is inherent, that comes with that higher awareness, and if there isn't, sure, but if there is, what does that mean that I should do right now, kind of, you know?
Thank you again. We could answer this question in different ways, and I'm going to try to hit on a few quickly. There are texts like the Srimad Bhagavatam, which was, you see, because if you zoom out far enough, if you look at our existence in this cosmos from a zoomed out perspective, one could say that there's one lesson that we're all meant to learn. There's one thing that we're meant to gain through all of our ups and downs and all the challenges and all the suffering and all the joys that we experience in this world. And that is just to reconnect with that source. And so in one sense, that becomes the highest goal, and the goal that includes all the others. But one could also zoom in and say, if you actually have that bhakti, if you've actually reconnected, or if you are in the process of reconnecting, how can you tolerate the sufferings of others? How could you be perfected spiritually and be callous to the suffering of others? Is that a possibility? And the great Bhakti Yogis say, no. They say that if you have bhakti, you have compassion. That it's not possible to have, that compassion is, again, within bhakti. If you don't have compassion, you don't really have bhakti. Or you could say, this is the way one great Bhakti Yogi said it. And if you think about this, I think you might find it really interesting. I've found it like endlessly fascinating and important and applicable in so many ways. But there's one great sage named Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And he said that when the heart is very soft and the heart is facing Radha and Krishna, then the feelings that heart has inside it is called prema, or love for God. He said if you take that same soft heart, which is capable of experiencing the emotions of bhakti, and you turn it from Radha and Krishna towards the rest of the world, then the same feeling that we call love, it turns into compassion. So it's the same heart. The heart that holds bhakti is the heart that holds compassion. It's just a question of which way it's looking. So if that's the case, then a true Bhakti Yogi, they have this quality, it's called para dukkha dukhi. It means that because they're so realized themselves, they don't really suffer in the way that others do. The things that can make others suffer, they're so far beyond that they don't suffer themselves. But what they do suffer is the suffering of others. They do have this compassion that causes pain in their own heart when they see the sufferings of others. And they naturally feel compelled to relieve that. And so that may manifest in this broadest way of saying we share bhakti, we share amagyana. But that may also manifest according to the individual and according to the circumstances that they're in specific actions in this world to relieve suffering. And those, I have like tremendous respect for people that I see really realize Bhakti Yogis that have found a way to address the issues that we're dealing with right here through Bhakti. One example I'd like to share is just recently came from a place just outside of Mumbai called the Govardhan Eco Village. Have you heard of that before? Govardhan Eco Village. So this is a place where, I just heard the news today that the current administration, governmental administration in the United States, just kind of set back all of the concerns about, I forget the exact term, but basically all the concerns for the ecologically, like all this research that was done and all the commitment that the previous administrations had, that they declared that these are issues and they're issues that our nation must remedy, that they just kind of threw all that out the window. And that's the world that we live in, that we have leaders that can do such things. The Govardhan Eco Village is a place where it's a community of Bhakti Yogis. They're worshiping Krishna, they're doing their Bhakti Yoga, they're meditating every morning, they're chanting, doing Kirtan every day, they're eating only prasadam. They're inviting people to come and learn about Bhakti. They've recreated a Vrindavan there so people can feel what it's like to be in Vrindavan. And at the same time, they're showing what is the real Vrindavan. It means seeing everything in connection with God, including the earth. And so they're showing how to live in a vegetarian diet where they care for the animals. They have a large goshala and they care for other animals there. They show how to harvest the water, how to deal with the sewage, basically every ecological question, they're answering in natural ways that are in harmony with the earth. And then they're sharing that with all the surrounding villages so that this understanding is spreading. They're not necessarily saying you have to be a Krishna devotee, but they're saying, hey, look at how we can live. There's a better way to live, and we can help you live that way yourselves. So some people reach out in those ways, some people are feeding the hungry, but they're feeding them prasadam. In so many different ways, people can be practicing bhakti fully, uncompromised, and with a heart full of compassion, reaching out in a practical way right here and now. Is that okay? Okay, thank you for your question. It's a good one to get started with. People, we have a couple more seats here. You're welcome to take them if you like. And we're taking questions for some time now, Q&A. Would anyone else like to ask a question? Christina, are you burning with a question? You're sure? All your questions, you've had them all answered. You're content. Okay. Thank you. I'm happy that you're sitting here too. Okay. Anybody else? Would anyone like to ask a question? The way that this works is it actually just doesn't work unless someone asks a question. That's why I become dependent on you.
I just want to ask that what responsibility we have for our parents, like if they're having any disease, like my dad is having kidney issue, kidney failure. So I want to ask that we should thought about that we can give them there's a responsibility as in, or like how can we take it? Like we should be emotional or like be what? Like practical or like in what zone?
So let me see if I can frame your question correctly. If we have a loved one, say, and let's say that they're going through some kind of physical ailment, maybe it's our parents who've done so much for us. Do we have a responsibility to them? Or is it because we're Bhakti Yogis that we can do whatever we want? Is there karma? Maybe this is what you're asking, right? Is there bad karma that we get for not taking care of our parents? What responsibility do we have? You see, okay, again, I can answer this on different levels. Okay? And I'm going to zoom out a little bit. Okay? I'm going to zoom out. So I'm going to speak broader than just your question, and then I'm going to zoom in with that reference, then I'm going to zoom back in on your question. So bear with me, okay? There's the great sage Vyasadeva. You're familiar with that name? Vyasadeva? Veda Vyasa? No? Yes? No. Okay. All of the sacred texts of ancient India stem from one body of literature called the Vedic literature. We call it the Vedic literature. Oh, how wonderful.
Hare Krishna.
Very, very kind of you. Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna. What a lovely garland. Practically all, there's a saying. It says, all the great sages, they borrow what they've learned from the infinite sky of the mind of the great sage Vyasadeva. This is the sage that had the capability 5,000 years ago, up in these mountains, way up. He could sit in one place, go deep within, begin to vibrate on the same vibration as a body of knowledge, a universal body of knowledge called the Veda. It's eternal. It's called Apurusheya. It's not created. It's not man-made. It's always existed. It's like a manual for the universe that exists, and we can tap into it at any. Not anyone with a qualification can tap into it at any time. Now does that sound a little crazy? A little bit? A little bit mythological, maybe? There's some body of knowledge floating around and someone can tap into. But you know what? If I said that like 200 years ago, I think you could make a better argument that it sounds like mythology. But actually today, we know things. Like take the tent that I'm sitting under right now, right? Which is just, I don't know, is it 10 feet by 10 feet or something like that? Maybe it's 10 square feet, or maybe, I don't know, 15 square feet or something like that. Within this small little area, everything that is on YouTube, every bit of knowledge, what do they call it? Bits? They call it bits, right? What do they call it? Digital bits of information or something. They're all right here within this space. They're actually even a smaller space if I just want. Practically, they're in the palm of my hand, right? They're floating through the air. All this information. And if one has the proper technology, they can tap into it and download it. Right? And not just YouTube. I mean, YouTube's huge, but everything on the internet is floating right there. And there's radio waves and other forms of information that's just floating through the air. And if someone has the technology, they can tap into it and download it. So these yogis said that this body of knowledge is always floating. It's available. It's out there. And a yogi with the right qualification could tap into that body of knowledge. Vyasadeva was entrusted with the responsibility of tapping into the Veda. And for the Kali Yuga, for the age that we live in now, where people have shorter lives, are less lucky, they're more unfortunate, and most of all, their minds are always disturbed. These people have trouble tapping into that knowledge and trouble understanding it. So he tapped into it, and then he edited it. He kind of divided it into different divisions, and then he had it written down so that it could be preserved and handed down in this age. Okay? So he created this body of... He didn't create the body of knowledge. He gave us access to this body of knowledge. And he divided it into different sections. And broadly, we can say there are three sections that he's divided into. One is called the Karma section, Karma Kanda. One is called the Jnana section, the Jnana Kanda. One is called the Bhakti section, the Bhakti Kanda. Okay? So the Karma section is all about how can I enjoy this world as much as possible. I used to try to enjoy the world recklessly. I didn't recognize that there was any higher power. I didn't recognize that everything I have in this world is a gift. We're getting closer to your question right now, okay? Everything that I have in this world, my body, I didn't create it, right? The light and the warmth that we get from the sun should not be taken for granted. There's actually a person behind the sun that has taken up the responsibility to provide the light and provide the heat that it gives us. Okay? The rain, right? The river, the mountain. You know, you look at that mountain, it looks like just a big piece of rock. But what it is it's full of minerals. And when it rains, all the minerals come washing down the mountain. And some of it collects in the river, and the river takes them miles and miles away. Right? I just came from Bengal, not too far from where the Ganges enters the Bay of Bengal. Hundreds and hundreds of miles. And villages all along live by the grace of that river and all the nutrients that it provides to the land. Right? So I used to try to enjoy this world, one could say. I used to try to enjoy this world, not even thinking I owe a debt to anyone. But when you read the Vedas, it says, no, no, you're indebted to the god of the sun. You're indebted to the god of the moon. You're indebted to the holy river. You're indebted to the mountain. You're indebted in so many debts. Also, you're indebted to the forefathers because they also handed everything down for you. The knowledge that you have, right? The care that they gave. It's not that you just accept it and don't have any responsibility to repay it. You do. You have to repay that. Right? Okay. So in that sense, it's considered dharmic to be concerned for our parents. It's considered important. It's considered decent and human, and it's a step up in evolution from thinking, almost ignoring the fact that I've been given all these gifts. Look who we have here! What a great joy to see my friend. I had no idea you would be here. So happy to see you, Prabhu. You understand? Now, there's still another understanding. What I've shared right now, are you with me? Okay. I'm going to use an analogy that relates to everything that I just shared. Say you have a child and their parents are wealthy. So they've grown up kind of privileged, but they're young, they're ignorant, they don't recognize that they get a lot more than other people have gotten, and they may not be fully appreciative of all that's being provided for them. If you ask that child, where do you get your food? The child might say, I get it myself. This is a 5-year-old kid, right? You get it yourself. How do you do that? I walk over to the refrigerator, I open up the door, I take it out, right? Okay, yes, in one sense, you do get the food yourself if that's the case. But anybody that knows more, anybody that has a broader perspective, anybody that has a deeper body of knowledge understands that really that food was provided for them. That the parents worked hard, earned money, went to the grocery store, bought the food, transported it to the refrigerator and put it in the refrigerator, thinking about the benefit of the child all along. So a more thorough and a more accurate and a more appropriate answer would be, where do you get your food? My parents provided the food for me. Or sometimes in a family like that, there are servants within the house, and the servant will provide the food, and many other other types of care, other types of resources for the child. Now, a very ignorant child would have no appreciation for the parents, no appreciation for the servants in the home. They just take it for granted. This is mine, and it should be provided for me. But if they mature, if they evolve, then that gratitude is natural, and so they should feel a sense of gratitude towards the servants in the home. What if they felt gratitude for the servants, but not for the parents? Right? What if they said, "Thank you, dear butler or servant in the home. Thank you for providing my food." Is that a better state of consciousness, more evolved than not thanking them at all? It's a step up, right? But what if they were thanking the servants, but they never thanked the parents, who are the ones that act? In one sense, the servants are only doing it because they're getting paid by the parents. So the real care and the resources are really actually provided by the parents. Okay. So this is, if you read just the Vedas, you might think, I have a debt to the god of the sun. I have a debt to the god of the rain. I have a debt to the god of the moon, etc. And that's a step up. That's good. You're evolving if you feel a sense of gratitude, and you're doing good things if you're expressing that gratitude, say through ritual. I do a yagna, I do a puja, I make an offering, etc. You're evolving. You're stepping forward. You're understanding more. Your knowledge is increasing, and you're cultivating good karma, which results in greater happiness and pleasures in life. But you still haven't really evolved. to truth until the child has actually appreciated the love of the parents. And so Vyasadeva will ultimately reveal that all of those gods and goddesses that are providing everything that we have, it's all provided ultimately by Bhagavan. It's actually all coming from one root of all existence, one person who's empowering the devas to give us the light and the heat, to give us the rain, to give us everything that we have. That it's actually all coming from this one being. And if you appreciate that one being, in one sense, you don't have debts to anyone else. You have no obligation to anyone else, right? But also, it can be said that if you actually appreciate that being for real, you'll appreciate everything that's provided by that being. In other words, you'll appreciate every other living being in relation to that being, seeing them all as part of that being. This is Bhagavad Gita. In Bhagavad Gita, the very famous verse, you may be familiar with it. Tadvidhi pranipatena priprashnena sevaya upadekshanti te jnanam jnaninas tattvadarshana. Just try to learn the truth by approaching a guru, by approaching a master, a spiritual master. And then it describes how you approach them. You inquire from them submissively, and you render service unto them. And it says that these great souls, they're called the Tattvadarshi, they see the truth. They can share knowledge. They can bless you with knowledge because they have seen the truth. Have you heard that verse before? Kind of new to you? Okay, that's fine. Then there's a verse that comes right after that. And it describes what you gain from them, what you learn from, what they see that you don't see that they help you see. And there it says that when you've received that knowledge, you'll see that all living beings are but a part of that supreme being, or that they are mine. Krishna is saying, or that they are mine. You begin to see everything and everyone in connection to that, including your parents, right? So in one sense, it's just natural as a decent human being to feel a sense of obligation to your parents and to return the care that they gave to you when the time comes when they need help from you. And that's something that in India is kind of deeply ingrained, right? But sometimes that that decent dharmic living is a good thing. But there are other texts that are going to show that there's still more. And generally, when one gains that deeper knowledge, that deeper appreciation, that deeper spiritual connection, and that deeper spiritual love, commonly they follow that. They continue to follow that dharma, but they do it with this broader perspective. So, in other words, they'll thank the butlers and the servants in the house, but they'll know and appreciate that it's all coming from the parents. And so we'll thank the gods, and we'll thank Lord Shiva, we'll thank Goddess Indra, the god Indra and Surya, and we'll show our respects to them, seeing them in the context of them being empowered ultimately by Bhagavan, by Sri Krishna. This is what the Bhagavad Gita teaches. If you look at it closely, you'll see this is what it's saying. Is that okay? So, but if you want, would you like me to take it more practical? Because my guess is that it was coming from your own circumstances. Yeah? Or that was enough? Okay, yeah. All right. Thank you for your question. It was a good one. Would anyone else like to ask a question? We need a question. You can't continue without one. The whole thing comes to a grinding halt. If someone, even the people in line, don't ask a question coming your way.
So I have a question that sometimes, there are many things you ought to do in your spiritual life or even to be a good human being, you know, for example, like how we say you should be vegan or vegetarian, but because we have certain tendencies or certain habits, certain attachments, you fail. And many times it happens, you find yourself praying also. You pray, and then there's no answer, there's no help. So what do you do then with these tendencies, these attachments? How do you deal with it? And and sometimes the repercussions of these are like quite huge, so it becomes very difficult to reconcile your daily life, or like even contemplating the future. Like, for example, if I love sugar and I know it's a bad tendency. So for example, if I love sugar and I cannot stop for whatever reason, but I'm continuously eating, but I know in the long run it's going to give me diabetes. So, and you still can't help yourself. So it's like a very difficult situation. So what do you do when even your prayers are like not really answered, or like maybe answered too late? I don't know.
Arjuna asked a similar question to Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. Essentially, why do we do these things even when we know they're not good for us? And Krishna said, it's desire, kama. And he began to describe where that desire exists within our inner and external bodies. And he says that it can be countered, right? There's a conventional way to answer that question. Again, like a conventional Vedanta would say that the reason that anyone has difficulty being controlled and refraining from doing activities that are harmful to themselves is due to ignorance. Is because they don't actually understand the full truth of their situation. They don't understand, I'm not this body. They don't understand, I'm not this mind. Because there's a place within the mind. There's a feature of the mind, or a part of the mind, that's programmed with likes and dislikes. And we tend to follow that programming. It's actually, the more you study it and the more you see, knowledge can counter it. Knowledge directly counters ignorance. And so if you apply knowledge to the ignorance, it will dissolve. It will dissipate. And so part of that knowledge is to understand this, is that our likes and dislikes are very random. And the things that we think we need to be happy, we actually don't need them to be happy. And the things that we feel will take happiness away from us don't take happiness away from us. We're just programmed to identify this gives happiness and this doesn't give happiness. But it could have just been programmed. I'll give you an example. If we had a computer here right now, let's say we had a laptop computer, and we attached a camera to that. The computer represents the mind. The camera represents the eyes. You with me? And then we attached a speaker to it. Welcome, good to see you. And then we attached a speaker to it. The speaker represents the voice. Okay, so we have the body and the mind of a kind of a virtual body and mind here, a replica of the body and the mind. Some of the senses and the mind itself. Now we could program the computer just like we can program a mind. We could program the computer that when you flash a red light in front of the camera, that it triggers an impulse. It triggers a reaction from the computer, and it responds by saying, I like red. Okay, you understand? You flash a red light in front of the camera, and a voice comes out of the computer speaker saying, I like red. We could program a computer to do that, yes? And then we could go further and program it that when we flash a blue light in front of the camera, that the computer responds by saying, I don't like blue. We could do that as well, yes? Now here's the point. We could just as easily flip them so that it says, I don't like red and I do like blue. It's not that red is good and blue is bad. It's just that the computer's been programmed to respond to red as good and to respond to blue as bad. Right? Have you ever heard teachings, like spiritual teachings, where they say there is no good or bad? It doesn't mean that morally there's no good behavior, bad behavior, but it means we see certain things as good, they bring happiness, and certain things as bad, they bring misery. But it's only because our mind has been programmed to respond to that, to respond to them in that way. You're with me still? So if that's the case, and this is what the yogis are telling us, this is like one of the big fundamental things that they're telling us, is that from the moment that we wake up in the morning to the moment that we go to sleep at night, we're pursuing those things that we feel, that we've been programmed to respond to as giving us happiness. But we could have just as easily been programmed another way. It's not that happiness lies within those objects. As a matter of fact, they'll say that actually suffering lies within those objects, because even if they give us some temporary pleasure, the nature of the material energy is that it's always moving and always shifting and always changing. So what gives us pleasure now changes, and then we suffer. So the yogis are saying, know that you are not your body. Know that the programming in your mind is not truthful, is illusory, and find the real happiness that exists within yourself all the time. So that's knowledge, right? That's called jnana. And with that knowledge, you can become you can gain control, right? You can feel like, oh, I don't need that thing that I keep going back to impulsively again and again and again. It actually doesn't give me happiness. It gives me suffering. I'm going to refrain, right? And this is something that I found in life. This is my own experience. That when we become determined, when we have a desire, let's say, to become more disciplined in life, in whatever it is, say, I want to read a book a month this year, right? We take a New Year's resolution. And so then, January 1st comes and we open up a book and we start to read. And by the time we're halfway through a page, we're kind of bored and it feels kind of tedious and we feel like scrolling on the phone or something like that. And we try it for a couple of days and we're like, you know what, maybe I'm not into reading. Or we say, you know what, I see all these people jogging every day. I'm going to be like them. They look healthy. They look dynamic. I want to live and be like that. And so the first day of the year, we start to jog a little bit. And before we're like halfway down the block, we're huffing and puffing. And we're saying, how do they do it? I don't know how they do it. This is too much. I'm not going to do this. But anytime we try to take up a discipline like that, there's always a hump to get over initially. But if we stick it out, it's not long before it becomes much easier. It's not, if we read for a week, even though it's difficult, by the time that week's over, we start to enjoy it. And sometimes we can't put the book down, right? If you keep jogging, in a short time, your lungs and your body gets more used to it, and you find that you can run much longer distances just because you stuck with it a little bit, right? So we need knowledge. We need to understand that these external things aren't going to give us happiness, and we need the determination to get over the hump and end up on the other side as a self-controlled yogi. Now, all that I said right now is conventional Vedanta. Any Vedantin will tell you that. But the Bhakti Yogis have another secret. And this is revealed by Vyasadeva in his most important texts. And he's saying that when you actually develop love, bhakti, for God, and there are different practices to attain that, right? Hearing from the Srimad Bhagavatam, chanting the Lord's names, worshipping the deity. And there's different ways that that's practiced. But if through that practice one begins to develop affection within the heart for God, then the knowledge and the detachment that the conventional Vedantins have, it comes to you automatically. Because when your attention and your awareness becomes riveted out of love rivets our attention. When someone falls in love with another person, they begin to think about that person all the time. All their attention goes in that direction. And so when one's attention and one's awareness begins to be drawn powerfully towards this all beautiful, powerful figure in the form of Bhagavan, then detachment from these things of this world, it comes automatically. Just the way that when you fall in love with another person, you forget about the other things that you used to be interested in. So knowledge can help counter these attachments that we have, and bhakti even more so can counter these attachments that we have. Is that okay? Yes, follow-up question.
Thank you. So I just find that it's very, very unfair for God or Supreme or whoever to expect us to fall in love with Him or to have affection with Him. Because when I'm with someone like my parents or my friends, I can see them. I can talk to them. It's like it's so tangible. So the love naturally develops. But it's so unfair that we are expected to fall in love with someone with with something somebody said in a book, you know, or with a statue I mean, yeah, sometimes I do feel that yes, this is not a statue. Of course, we do get those divine energies, but the rest of the time, it just feels a huge ask. You know, that you fall in love with something out of your reach. You know, so um, I don't know if that's a question.
I guess the question would be, what do I have to say about that? And thank you for sharing that. Um, I think you've expressed something that probably a lot of people feel. I'm sure millions of people feel this way. There's so many ways I could approach that. It's a really interesting topic. Really, if we want to know any subject, what becomes valuable is that we look at it from different perspectives. Right? Sometimes you look at something from one perspective and it appears one way, and then when you zoom out and look at it from a distant perspective, it appears very different. You understand? So I believe I can understand totally how you could feel exactly how you feel when you look at it from a very zoomed in perspective. But what if that perspective was so limited that you couldn't see the whole picture? Right? There's a depth of knowledge that's provided in these Vedic texts, and if you really engage with it, in other words, you said it's unfair to be asked to fall in love with someone, some god, because it writes about them in this book. But what if that book didn't just say you're supposed to fall in love with this god or else you will suffer? But what if that book gave you a whole new perspective on who you are and where you exist in this whole cosmic scheme? And it said, if you can see the world from that perspective, then you could understand how that being is not who you thought they were. In other words, what if you could get so informed that you even understood that the lack of love that one might feel has a lot to do with one's own desire to be independent of that? What if sometimes a child or a young person wanders from home, right? Sometimes they feel the rules that the parents imposed on them were oppressive. And they said, I don't want your oppressive rules anymore. I want to be independent of you. I resent you for trying to impose these rules, and I'm turning my back on you, and I'm walking away. And the parents may try to get the child back. They may try to convince them, please come back. I love you. Everything that I was doing for you was out of love for you. But the child can't process that, or the teenager, let's say, probably in this case, right? The teenager can't process that the rules that you're imposing on me did not at all seem like love. I perceive them as actually like hostile, right? And so they walk away. And the parents, the more they try to explain to the child, it's not hostility, it's love, the more that the child just wants to walk away. And sometimes the parent has to say, I just have to let them go. The more that I try to bring them back, the more that they want to go. And then sometimes the last person that the child can hear from is going to be the parents. It has to be someone else. Sometimes like there's like a cool aunt or uncle or something like that. You understand? Someone that the child bears no resentment. The uncle, the aunt, they were never imposing any kind of regulations on the child. So they don't have any resentment towards them. But that person also has the perspective of the parents. So they're able to come and say, no, you're misunderstanding. Everything they were doing for you was out of love. And they help the child process that this was love all along. You understand? So is it possible that the lack of love that we feel is something that is because our own turning our back? And maybe in some way we've made a choice to turn our back on God and said, I want to be independent and I don't want to know you. And Krishna within the heart says, if you don't want to know me, then I'll allow you to forget me. This is also Bhagavad Gita. Sarvasya chaham hridishani vishto. I'm situated in the heart of every living being, Krishna says. Mata smritir jnanam apohanam cha. And it's me that gives knowledge and remembrance and even forgetfulness. If you want, this is when we come to the Bhakti Yogis and those that have, say we have the connection and we know this being. So good to see you. They're saying that this being that we're meant to fall in love with is so kind and so merciful and so not at all oppressive, but saying, if you, I love you, but if you want to turn from me, then turn. And I'll accompany you in your heart. And I'll try to speak to you. But if you're determined not to hear me, you won't hear me. And I'll try to send a cool aunt or a cool uncle every now and then to remind you. And it'll be up to you whether or not you want to hear that message. So that's the perspective that they're giving us. And that whether it be in the form of a person or in the form of a text, a spiritual text, if generally what happens is when that child wanders away from home, they begin to suffer. You know, they thought they had some cool people to hang out with, and it turns out those cool people get them in trouble, and now they're living on the street, or then they find themselves in jail, and when they're in jail, what do? They call the parents, right? When you suffered enough and you realize my path isn't working, then you turn back to that one stable figure in life that you know actually does love you and will provide for you. And so generally the way this world works is that it is a place of suffering. And the question is, how do we process the suffering? And so we move through this world and we experience suffering as an impetus to turn back. But our problem is that we don't, that cool aunt or that cool uncle, if they're not qualified, they turn us off too. You understand? They're saying the cool aunt, your parents are great. What's the matter with you? You know, and we're not able to hear the message. But if they can speak to us in such a way that they really understand us, maybe they really hear us out, and then they really speak to us in a way that we can process, then on our own, we can choose to turn back. And so there are different religious texts, there are different preachers, there are all different kind of people that are saying you should turn back to God. And they may not appeal to us at all. But there may be some presentations, whether it's a text or whether it's a person, where something begins to awaken in us when we hear them speak. And our perspective begins to change. And we begin to process it in a different way. And I found in my own life, like I was raised Catholic, which was fine in one sense. I mean, it had its issues. But it also had a lot of beautiful teachings, a lot of valuable teachings. And it had its representatives, and some of them were nice and some of them not so nice in my life. But for whatever reason, it never captured me. But it was later in my life that representatives of the tradition of bhakti, they did capture me. And they captured me in different ways. They spoke to my mind, they spoke to my intelligence, they spoke to my heart in different ways. And that message I was able to hear. And then when I went back and looked at my Catholic upbringing, I actually kind of appreciated it a lot. More than I did when I was in it. And so, you know, I would look at it saying, it's not like, I'm forgetting the phrase that you used, but it's a big ask, I think you said, to ask us to fall in love. I think what you're really being asked to do is to investigate. And if you read, let me read you a little Bhagavad Gita, okay? Just a little bit. Because basically you have Krishna telling Arjuna throughout the Bhagavad Gita, you should turn to me. You should always think of me. You should depend only on me. And it can sound like, well, why you? And why do I have to think of you? Um, but Krishna begins to reveal that he's speaking this way out of love. I'll read something for you. Krishna says to Arjuna, this is right at the end of the Bhagavad Gita. The Supreme Lord is situated in everyone's heart, O Arjuna, and is directing the wanderings of all living entities, who are seated as if on a machine made of the material energy, the body. O Arjuna, surrender unto him utterly. By his grace, you will attain transcendental peace and the supreme and eternal abode. Thus I have explained to you knowledge still more confidential. Deliberate on this fully. Think about it. And then do what you wish to do. Right? Krishna says, and then I've shared so much with you. Please consider it carefully. I'm not going to tell you what to do. But then do what you wish to do. Then he says, because you are my very dear friend, I am speaking to you my supreme instruction, the most confidential knowledge of all. That knowledge means I'm a person, I'm here for you. You can turn to me and depend on me. Hear this from me, for it is for your benefit. Always think of me. Become my devotee. Worship me and offer your homage unto me. Thus you will come to me without fail. I promise you this because you are my very dear friend. So this is the way Krishna is approaching. He's not saying, you better read this, you better worship this person, otherwise you're doomed to hell. He's saying, I'm for your own good, I'm trying to share that you are like a leaf on a tree. And the leaf, as long as it's connected to the root of that tree, is nourished, it's vibrant, it's alive. And if it says, why can't I be the root of the tree? I don't want to be just one leaf. I want to be the center of the equation. Let me detach myself from the tree. At that moment, it begins to dry up. And so all Krishna is saying in the Bhagavad Gita is reconnect. This word yukta, nitya yukta, always be connected to me. The word yoga essentially means it's from the root yukta, and essentially means connect, like a leaf connects to a tree. It's not an oppressive order. It's a loving. It's a loving gift to say, just reconnect to me, and you'll feel vitalized again. That's what's being asked in Bhagavad Gita. Is that okay? Follow up? How do we reconnect? Well, okay, this is great. Because in the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna had his own idea about how I'm going to become spiritual. He was suffering. Just like I say, it's that suffering sets in. On the battlefield, you're familiar with the Bhagavad Gita. Okay. So on the battlefield, when he saw all the people he was going to have to fight against, some of them were so dear to him that he broke down. Full on anxiety, deep. He was crying. His voice was shaking. He just full on anxiety attack. And he said, I know that even though I have a lot materially, I'm like a prince or like a king practically. I'm very powerful physically. I'm very skilled in the military arts. I have fame. Everybody knows who I am. Great strength, wealth. He had, I believe, like 5 beautiful wives. Power. And still he was full of anxiety. But he thought, I know, I've lived in the forests. And I've met the yogis out there. And they don't have all these things that I have. But what they do have is peace. Peace of mind. Right? That's what I want. And he had his idea of how one achieves that. And do you know what that was? That idea that he, in his mind? You become a yogi that goes off into the forest, you sit alone, and you go into deep internal meditation. And what Krishna was saying to Arjuna, especially in the first 6 chapters of the Gita, he's saying, Arjuna, if you did that, even though your body would be out in the forest, your mind would still be on the battlefield, right? So that you're asking how to reconnect, and he's saying you won't be able to reconnect that way, Arjuna. And Arjuna's struggling with that and having difficulty figuring that out. But in the 6th chapter, Krishna finally says, if you want to practice that kind of yoga, let me describe what it looks like. And when he describes it in detail, Arjuna turns to Krishna and says, I don't think I can practice that yoga. I don't think I can reconnect in that way. Because the mind is more difficult to control than the wind. And Krishna says to Arjuna, it's okay, you can still be a yogi. And he says this very famous verse at the end of the 6th chapter. Yoginam api sarvesham. Amongst all the different yogis. There's many varieties. By that point in the Bhagavad Gita, he described many different yoga paths. But he says, Yoginam api sarvesham. Amongst all the different types of yogis, matkaten antaratmana. The one who is thinking of me, connected with me deep within themselves. Shraddhavan, with great faith. Bhajate yomam, worshipping me. Same yukta tamo mataha. Yukta. I say that they are yukta uttama, that they are the most connected to me. And they're the highest of all. Okay? So he's saying that you can best connect to him by always thinking of him within yourself. Now the next 8 chapters of Bhagavad Gita are all about how to do that. He starts off in the in the 7th chapter. He says, look at the universe that you're in. There are essentially 2 types of energy in it. There's the material energy and the spiritual energy. Bhumir, Apo, Nala, Vayu, Kangmano, Buddhir, Evacha, Ahankara, Ityang Me, Bina, Prakritir, Ashtada. There are 8 ingredients to the material energy: earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, ego. He says that's my separated material energy. And then he says, Apariyam itastvanyam prakritim vidime param. There's another energy that's param, that's higher. And he says that's the living entities, the souls, the spiritual energy, who are busy trying to taste, trying to enjoy, trying to exploit the material energy. Then he says, know that both of these energies, all these energies come from me. He says, and then he says, there's no truth superior to me. Mata parataram nanyat kinchit asti dhananjaya. And then he says, all things are strung on me as pearls are strung on a thread. You've heard that verse before? Right? When you look at a string of pearls, what do you see? You see the pearls. What do you not see? The string. But when you see the pearls are all strung like that, you know that the string is there. And so in one sense, when you see the pearls, you see the string because you know it's there. And so Krishna then goes on to say, I am the light of the sun, I am the light of the moon, I am the taste of water. He goes on about how everything that we see in this world, we can see that he's the string holding on together. And therefore, when we see it, we can think of him. Yeah. In the 10th chapter, he goes through a whole nother list of things that whatever we see in this world, we can think of him. That's called Vibhuti Yoga. This Vibhuti means whenever we see something great, something powerful, something beautiful, something that's got some shakti, some power, that's a Vibhuti. And he's saying wherever you see these Vibhutis in this world, they tend to make us forget God and focus on the person or the thing that's exhibiting it. But he's saying, know that it's all coming from me. So when you see it, even in someone else, you think of me. So he begins to describe ways that we can go through life and see him everywhere. Right? And then he'll say in the 12th chapter, best thing you can do is just sit peacefully and think of me always within yourself. Feel my love. You can always just sit and peacefully think of me, but most people can't do that. Our minds are too disturbed. He said, then you can practice the regulations of fixing your mind on me. Like, do you ever chant japa? Okay, or different types of meditation? Yeah, japa. So it's hard to do, isn't it? Sometimes. So I try to do this, but I have no interest in it. I have no taste for it. Okay, if you can't do that, then work for me. Get active. Just like you see so many people here putting on this festival. When they're putting on this, they're working very hard. But as they're working, they're thinking of Krishna. This is my offering to you. Right? So he's saying, oh, this is a good way that you can always be thinking of connecting. You know, he says if you can't do that, some people just due to their circumstances in life, they can't do that. He says then work selflessly and offer the results up. You know, act selflessly in this world and give, because that'll lead to you coming to these next stages eventually. So there's many. Bhagavad Gita is going to give us many ways, but all of them are designed to bring our awareness to him more and more, and ultimately achieve the stage of what we could call, like, say, unwavering meditative focus to that, connected to that root of all existence. Right. That's where we really find that true fulfillment, that true connection. But the Bhagavad Gita is going to be broad enough to help us at whatever stage you're at and encourage us how to achieve the next stage. Okay. So, long story short, that's what a guru is for. A guru knows you, knows your strengths, knows your weaknesses, knows the teachings and the path, and is able to cater the teachings and the practices from the sacred text to you and your specific circumstance and situation. What you'll be able to fully absorb your mind and absorb your body and ultimately absorb your mind. And they'll prescribe, just like a doctor prescribes one medicine for one person, another for another person. A true spiritual master knows the spiritual text and prescribes them in such a way they'll be effective in your own life. And so that's ultimately the answer to your question, is that when you have faith that someone can do that for me, then they can lay out a path for you that'll be... If you don't have that guidance, you might open up the book and say, oh, this is how it's supposed to be done, and I tried it and I couldn't do it. Because you needed someone to say, yeah, no, you're not ready to do that, but you're ready to do this. And then they encourage you to do that. And they give you a vision of how you'll benefit from that and where that will ultimately lead. And then you have the strength to practice. So that's why it's an essential part of the path. It's really said to be the first part of the path. When you get serious, first there's a little bit of faith, and then you begin to associate with people that are practicing, and your faith increases. But then you reach a point where you say, I want to practice this. I want to make this my life. I want to, with this short lifetime that I have, this is what I want to achieve. And at that point, you need a guide. You need a master to help you do it. Okay? Thank you. Thank you for your questions. Yes. Please. Can you get the mic person?
So it's a it's a personal question. It's on a personal level. So if you don't want to answer it, I'm more than comfortable. The way that you described the Gita was also, or the approach to finding Krishna or to find God, was very much along the lines that a Catholic would have described a monastic life. So what is it that you personally, I mean, I understand that you're a Catholic, what was the difference between that monastic life, which could have attracted you if you'd followed the Catholic path, and this particular path that you've now chosen?
Yes, I'll repeat the question. So it wasn't too personal. But what was it that I found, say, in the teachings of Bhagavad Gita that I didn't find in my Catholic upbringing? Am I something I'm missing? Why did one appeal to me and not the other? Okay, so when I was exposed to Catholicism, I was quite young. I wasn't really ready or eager. I didn't have a personal drive to find the truth about life through Catholicism. It wasn't. I was young, and I was doing it because my parents were telling me to do it. And when I got a little bit older, when I got to be about 12 or 13, I started reading a lot of books because I was trying to figure out what is life all about. You know, what are we supposed to figure out in this world? What are we supposed to do? What's meaningful? And I began to look in different ways, different places. I looked a lot into politics. When I was a kid, I was reading these books like, just all kind of like books about, you know, who Abby Hoffman is, or the Communist Manifesto, or the Malcolm X's autobiography, or I was reading all these different things. Yes, yes. As I entered my teens, as I became interested in this kind of thing. And I lived in New York City. And in New York City, you had exposure to like a lot of different kind of movements and thinkers and so on. And as I reached that age and I started inquiring from these and meeting these people, I, even though I was young and naive in many ways, I began to maybe I couldn't even articulate it so well then, but I found that they were really good at finding out what's wrong, but they really didn't know what to do about it. And I saw a lot of the problems that they were apparently fighting against. They actually embodied those same problems a lot themselves. So in the name of peace, you become hateful. Like I would see a lot of that kind of thing. And so then I began to shift. Somehow I was being carried in life by different influences, and I began to look more into spirituality. And that did lead me to looking back at the Bible a bit, and it did resonate with me quite a bit. In music, I was finding a lot of spiritual teachings, especially in reggae music. And I was also questioning all the different. I was questioning a lot of Christian teachings. Like I would try to find the flaw in them, the weakness in them, where what they're saying doesn't quite make sense. And I felt I could. At least, I don't want to say I have such appreciation for the teachings of Jesus and some of the great Christian saints. But the way that Christianity was presented to me, I saw certain inconsistencies in some of the ideas. Like, for instance, why would a loving God condemn someone to hell forever? That didn't make sense to me. There's certain things like that. I'm sorry? Yes. Yeah, okay. So somehow I had a group of friends. These are my close friends. And they got interested in bhakti. So while I'm searching all over the place, my own circle of friends had a deep, growing spiritual interest. And they were reading Srila Prabhupada's books. Okay? And they were the least likely candidates. They were street kids, like New York street kids. And when I know people like to make up stories about their, but these guys were like really, really rough. Maharaj has seen the photographs of them, and he can. They're scary people. They were like into violence, into fighting, into lots of drugs. Really wild kids. But somehow they took an interest in these books by Srila Prabhupada, and they could understand them, and they could explain them. And I took all of my little intelligence of my teenage years and I applied it to what they were saying, and I would try to find the same problems what they were saying, and they had answers for everything. So more than anything, it was that it could answer all my questions. I started taking more of an interest in it. And once it began to capture my faith on that level, like, okay, here seems to be an impenetrable philosophy about life, and it's got spirituality, and it makes a lot of sense. That led me to meeting people that practiced it, and in them, more so than in my friends, but in them I saw the beauty of how it can blossom in one's character. And so I'm not saying that there weren't any people like that when I was being raised as a Catholic, but I wasn't looking for it so much, and maybe less so. But when I was ready and looking for it, and I had this philosophy that answered all my questions, then I began to meet people that I really began to admire. And one day, one of those people came to did a program in one of these friends that I'm talking about. They had a little apartment in a ghetto neighborhood of New York City, and one sannyasi came and he spoke to us one night. And he sat down. There's a group of like 5 or 6 or 7 of us, just confused, wild teenage New York street kids. He was a very brilliant spiritual leader with global demands on his time and energy. And somehow he found the time to come to this dark, dingy corner of the New York street life and sat down with some really confused kids. And he spoke Bhagavad Gita to us, which I already was developing a liking towards due to my exposure with my friends. But when he spoke, I walked out of there saying, I have to dedicate my life to this now. Something in his words went into my ear, and not just to my head. They went into my head, but they also went into my, right here in this part of my body, I felt it. I have to do this. And so that's where it happened to me. At that time, sorry. At that time, I was 20 years old. So that was my story. That's how it affected me. Thank you. Thank you for the question. Happy to take it. How are we doing on time? One more question tonight. Would anyone like to ask one final question? Yes.
Hare Krishna. I've asked this question to a few other people before, but I don't know if I have the correct words to describe the question properly. So my question, how come we are in this current body and not in one of the past bodies that we've been in? So like, does that make sense?
Yes, but if I understand.
Okay, so like for instance, when I die, I will get another body. Will I have my present mind in that body? Possibly, right? But then why don't I have my present mind in my previous body? Does that make sense?
Thank you. So why didn't I have my present mind in my previous body?
Why are we all in the bodies that we are in right now? And I don't mean like because of karma or whatever, like I mean like specifically why am I not. Okay, you answer.
Well, the problem is because karma is exactly the reason. But let me explain what I'm saying and see if it answers your question, and if not, we'll go deeper. We'll try to go deeper. Krishna mentions the word karma in the Bhagavad Gita, and Arjuna immediately asks, "What is karma?" He listed a bunch of terms, and one of them was karma, and Krishna says, "What is karma?" And essentially, what Krishna says is that force which provides our next body, which makes our next body for us. That there's a law. There's a program, you could say. Like the yogis use different analogies. Like they would say this world is like a reflection or an illusion. But if they had the technology that we have today, the modern yogis would say this world is like a virtual reality. Okay? And I don't want to zoom too far out. I could. Okay. If you ask, I will. Imagine if you had a desire and I were your friend. And your desire was to fly in the sky like a bird. Okay? You saw birds flying. You said, what must it be like to fly? I've always wanted to do that. Not in an airplane, but like really like a bird. And I said to you, well, you know that I create virtual realities. And I could create that experience for you. And you said, really? And I said, I could do that. And you said, I would really like to try that. I said, okay, give me a week and then come to my place and I'll set that up for you. And so you wait a week and I've been doing my programming. And then you come in and I say, now lie down on this platform, plug in these goggles, plug in these headphones. I give you some wings and there's like some kind of fan in front of you, and I've created all this equipment. Yeah, and I say, now just start to flap your wings. Exactly. You start to lift off, and it feels exactly like what it would feel like to take off. And it's very realistic. As you're going up, everything's becoming smaller, and you're soaring high in the sky, and you're feeling the thrill that you anticipated feeling by flying away above the earth and looking down. And you fly around for some time like that, and eventually you come back down, and you land, and you take off the equipment, and you say, "Oh my God, that was so great! I couldn't believe it. You really did it. It was exactly what I was looking for. Thank you." And I said, "Oh, it's no problem. I'm happy to do it. Is there anything else you would like to do?" And he said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, I could design anything for you in a virtual world." He said, "Really?" And so I said, "Well, yeah, what do you want?" "Well, I want to be a billionaire. I want a famous movie star as a husband. I want this kind of car and this kind of home and this and that." And you start to list all that. I want to be famous. And so I say, "Okay, give me a little time." And I create all those things in the virtual world for you. I'm fulfilling your desires. And you come in and you plug in, and I see that I've been able to fulfill your desires virtually, and you become attached to it. And now you don't want to stop. You don't want to come out. Why would you want to come out? It's your desires are being fulfilled here. But I know, I begin to say, this isn't so good. She's stuck in a computer world, and there's a whole nother world out here for the real world, which is where her real self-interest lies. And part of me is saying I should just take this equipment away from you. But another part of me is saying, if I did, even though I took it away from you, you would still want it. You would still want it yourself. So what I need to do is design a way where on your own, you decide you don't want the illusion anymore, you want the reality. Okay? Does that make sense? So what I do is I download and install a couple programs into your virtual worlds. One of them is called Time, right? Up to this point, whatever you had in your virtual world was yours and it stayed. But once I installed Time into that world, that changed things. And the things that were giving you pleasure and joy and happiness in the virtual world, you start to lose them. And when you lose them, you feel pain. And then another program I installed is called Karma. You used to be moving around that world without any consequences. Now you have to be careful, because according to how you act, you get a certain result. Right? If you're not kind to someone else in the virtual reality, then you're going to get some unkindness coming your way. Right? But I designed it that way actually for some type of evolution in you. So that on your own, you'll begin to feel like this is not my home. That there's something more for me beyond this that I'm meant to discover. And you develop the internal detachment that I don't want this anymore. So that when you come out, you're not dying to go back in. And Krishna speaks about it that way. And once you return to the reality, he says you never return to this illusory realm. Right? So that's what karma is doing. But it's responding to your previous. It's two things. The next body is dependent on. One is your desire. What is that you want? I'll create it for you. But what is the karma that you've accrued? So you get your desire fulfilled, but it can be on this level or it can be on that level. Someone desires sexual gratification. If their karma bank is very high, they'll be born on the heavenly planets in a beautiful body with free to explore it in ways that we can't even imagine in this world. If someone has very low karma, they can be a pigeon and just be pursuing sexual gratification all the time on the earth in this much cruder way. So it depends on the desire and it depends on the karma. You enter the next form. That form is designed just around your consciousness, what you want and how you behave. And you take the next body. But you take the next body, but you bring your mind with you. The subtle body, Krishna says it's like an aroma carries a scent. So when the self goes to the next body, it brings the mind with it. But then the next question is, then why don't I remember everything? Is that what you would ask? Or this is where your question, I think, was getting very individualist, and I want to hear what you had to say at this point.
Yeah, I guess because I have this understanding that in my previous life I was an Indian bodied person living in India. This is what my friend told me. So, whatever, I believe it. Why am I not in that body? Why am I now, not why am I in a woman's body because of my karma? I'm saying, like, why am I not presently experiencing that reality as an Indian man? Even though it did happen in the past, it did exist. Why am I not there? Why is that not the present?
That's kind of like saying, I went to the Bahamas, I spent all my money, I came back to where I live. Why am I still not in the Bahamas? Because you spent your credit. Or it's like saying, I was in prison, I did my time, I got out. Why am I not still in prison? Because you did your time. So whether it's bad karma or good karma, you spent it. And then you moved on. And you spent it within a world, the material realm, the material energy is constantly in a state of flux. So nothing lasts. You're not in the same body you were in yesterday. Right? So nothing of this material world lasts. So for all these reasons, you couldn't remain in that body. And you created your next destiny for the next body that you're meant to take. Does that help? Okay. Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate the question. So that's it for tonight, folks. But we'll be doing this every night for this whole festival. You're all welcome to come. And in the mornings, we'll also be giving classes. My friend Yogi Charu is teaching really excellent yoga meditation classes at 8 a.m. every day. He is a master. He is unique. He's very special. He'll be doing probably 35 minutes of asana and 15 minutes of meditation. And then he'll just get creative as this goes on. He'll see what people want or need. And then from 9 until 10, I'll be teaching yoga philosophy. We had a great time last year. We had like 50 to 80 people every day. Lots of great questions. And so I'll be doing that all mornings except Monday mornings. We'll be doing that. So if you're interested, please come. I'd be happy to see you there. We'll have a good time together. That's what we're meant to do in this world, is to inquire deeper into reality. We become better people when we do. We become happier when we do. And we can do it together. We got some time here for some weeks that we can pursue these things. Also, please, of course, check out the Kirtan. That's where this all leads. And the Kirtan gets very exciting now. And of course, there's prasadam. So there's so much to do here every night. Thank you all so much. It's been a joy to spend this time with you. Hari Om Tat Sat.